Welcome to Small Business, Big Network, the podcast for small business owners who want big results from their networking. I'm Liz Drury, a freelance voiceover artist who knows that if you're not working, then networking could help. David Barnett is a broker who helps people to buy and sell businesses. He encourages his clients who are looking to buy a business to network in the right places, so that when a business they're potentially interested in buying comes up for sale, they're already known in the right sector. Thank you very much for being my guest on the podcast today, David.
It's great to be here. I love to come out and have conversations.
Now, people are going to hear straight away that we're not in the same country, so tell me whereabouts you are, David.
I live in Canada, and I live on the East Coast in New Brunswick, so I'm very much on the Atlantic Ocean, and I've been here my whole life. This is where I grew up, and I do business with people largely in Canada, the US, but to a lesser extent, we have clients as well in the UK and Ireland, as well as Australia and New Zealand too.
Yeah, that's the nice thing these days, isn't it? That the world's a much smaller place for doing business.
It's true.
Now, your business is all around buying and selling businesses, but I want to go back to the start first, David. What was it that you studied at university, and what did you want to be when you were younger?
You know, it's funny. I always thought growing up that I was interested in business, and I went to university to study business, thinking that it would make me into a better business person. I didn't really realize when I went to university that that's not really what they do at business school. They teach you how to be what I describe now as a sort of Fortune 500 bureaucrat. You know, someone who's going to be in the middle management of one of these big companies.
Yeah.
And I can remember being actually on a bus talking with a stranger I had just met after I was finished university, expressing that I just really wanted to be a part of making deals. And I didn't even know at the time that there was such a thing as a business broker or that there was an industry of people who do that. But later, that's where I ended up. And today, I'm no longer a business broker, but we're a consulting company. And we were helping people with that very thing today. Yeah.
So after you went to university, what was your first job? What did you come out of there and go into?
Well, it was actually a great opportunity. Do you remember the Yellow Pages?
I do.
Liz? Yeah. So I became a sales rep for the Yellow Pages. So it was my job to go and visit and meet with the owners and managers of all the businesses that we see driving around our towns. And so I got to learn how different businesses make money, what kind of customers they were trying to seek. And, you know, I would ask open-ended questions like, the next time the phone rings, who would you like it to be? Describe that ideal customer. And so this allowed me to develop a real broad depth of knowledge across all the different sorts of small business areas. And it really helped me out later on when I got into the world of financing and ultimately business brokerage.
Yeah. It's funny you should mention Yellow Pages because I just read something on my social media feed this morning from someone that I know through networking, and she'd been at a networking meeting and said something about Yellow Pages, and the person she was talking to, who was quite a bit younger than her, had no idea what she was talking about. And she said, I can't believe there are people now who don't know what Yellow Pages was.
I describe it as the pre-internet Google.
Yeah.
Because it was, and it was very local. When I was in the Yellow Pages until 2006, and at that time Google was around, but if you typed plumber into Google, you would get a plumber in Southern California. Like they hadn't figured out how to make the searches localized by that point. But it was really obvious to see the direction that things were headed. And I knew that it was probably time to go look for something else to do. Because I could tell the days would be numbered. Yeah.
So where did you go next?
So I left and I started a business with a friend, a small business. And we actually got into junk removal. So we were going to people's homes and taking the junk away. And we grew that business quite quickly. Within a year, we had a few employees. My partner and I were no longer in the truck, and we grew that, and ultimately realized that doing a home service business like that was not something that really interested me. And so we sold the business. And that was my first sort of taste of what it's really like to do a deal, to do a transaction.
Yeah.
And so we found a buyer, we worked out the terms of the deal, we figured out, how to get the paperwork done with the lawyer and everything. And we sold the business. And then I went and found something else to do, which is I became a finance broker for small and medium-sized businesses. So then I was meeting with small business owners and helping them obtain either leases or loans or lines of credit or what we call factoring facilities, which is when you want to pledge your receivables in order to get cash today. And I was working with small business owners on helping to secure this financing when I started to meet more and more people who were looking for money to buy complete businesses and to buy them as a going concern. That's what led me into the world of business brokerage.
Yeah. And is it what you expect it to be? Has it been as good as you thought it would be? Has it been harder than you thought?
Oh, business brokerage is an absolutely awful business. So I got into brokerage. I ran a brokerage office for 4 years. And in that time, we sold 35 companies. And when you express it like that, you get this idea of a business which is regularly doing business and making money and all this kind of stuff. But the reality is that business brokerage is based upon the idea of the real estate industry, where you find a business owner who wants to sell their business, you prepare the business, you advertise it, you meet buyers, you find the right buyer, you help them negotiate, and then you help the buyer obtain the financing, and you sort of shepherd the deal through the lawyers and everybody. And the reality is that it can take years to find the right buyer. It can take months and months of work on a deal just to have the deal fall apart. One of the first businesses I listed for sale was a fried chicken franchise restaurant, and I sold that business 3 times in 3 years. And the first 2 times I sold it, the deal fell apart at the last minute.
Yeah.
And, so no commission was earned.
Yeah.
Right. And when I did ultimately sell it, the commission check was, tens of thousands of dollars. And the seller said to me, wow, look at you, look at how much you've earned. Isn't that great? And I said to him, look, the person who stands at the front counter taking orders has earned more money since I've met you than I have.
Yeah.
I put years into this deal. And so that's what I say when it's a terrible business, because we, over the course of those 3.5 to 4 years, we had 3 different periods with no deal closings for 7 to 9 month stretches.
Wow.
And so we had a real office in a strip plaza, and I had a receptionist, and we had a couple of associates who were on commission as well. But there were times when I would basically have to pay the overhead of the business for 9 months in a row before the next deal came through. And that's why I describe it as being such a terrible business. When I ultimately left brokerage and went into banking for a short while. I worked for a bank for 3.5 years. And before finally coming back out and starting the business I have today, which is still helping people buy and sell businesses, but we do it following a consulting model. So it's not contingency revenue. We work with buyers and sellers, and we help them through the process. And we basically bill people for each step as we go through the process.
Yeah.
Ultimately, our business selling clients end up paying us a lot less money than what they would pay to a broker. We get the benefit of a much smoother cash flow. And the advantage when we work with buyers is that we're not conflicted, because we're not being paid by the seller. When buyers hire us to help them look at a deal, we're just working for them with only their interests at heart. So it's actually proven to be a great new way to do the business. And I started this 11 years ago. So it's been quite some time that it's been working out really well.
Yeah. So what kind of people do you work with? Who are they, and what kinds of businesses are they looking to buy?
It's people from really every segment of life, and they're looking to buy all kinds of different businesses. And we help people with everything outside of agriculture. There are just too many specific local rules with that industry that we can't be expert on. But, we're talking about dry cleaning shops, restaurants, catering businesses, hotels, motels, online businesses of different kinds, consulting businesses, you name it, we've handled it before. And it's that repeated work in the same fields that creates an advantage for us. Because when we're working with a buyer, for example, it's often the first time that they've ever bought a business, but we may have helped dozens of people buy that kind of business.
Yeah.
And so it means that we're able to work through the information and documentation much more quickly than they would.
Yeah.
And point them to the red flags. It's impossible to know everything about a business, especially a small business, because these are so often owner-operated type of affairs with a lot of stuff being in the heads of the owner. So what we do is we make sure that our client understands where sort of the points of weakness are, that they're going to have to make sure that they examine further in the due diligence process, or make sure that they document correctly in their transition period with the seller. And what we coach people to do is to have a deal structure which creates a requirement for the seller to participate in the success of the buyer. And so what that usually means is that the seller is not paid in full on closing day, that there's some degree of what we call seller finance that occurs over time. And in order for the seller to collect all that money, they need to pick a buyer who's going to be successful and then make sure that they train that person properly and give them all the information and guidance and a bit of coaching. And what we find is that when the deals are set up properly, the buyer and seller, develop a good relationship. They trust each other. They work with each other. And oftentimes, years later, the two of them will call each other friends. We'll build a positive relationship that works well. And we try to create these circumstances so that somebody who has a less than honorable intent often gets shaken out of the process before they get to closing day. Yeah. And that's the easiest way to protect someone in one of these deals. I'll often say, to a buyer, hey, like if the seller won't agree to any deal that involves any kind of seller financing, it might mean one of these things. It might mean that they know they're lying to you about something. It might mean that they are aware of changes in the market that are going to create difficulties for this business. Or they may not have any confidence in you that you're going to be able to operate the business. And I'll say to people, all three of those reasons are a great reason not to buy a business.
Yeah. So are there any unusual or particularly interesting businesses that you've helped people to buy?
That's a great question, because we kind of imagine businesses falling into some pretty standard buckets out there, right? Like the food businesses or hospitality businesses and retail businesses and all this kind of thing. What we often find is that there could be an interesting flavor or twist on a standard business. One of the interesting businesses that I helped someone sell was one of these inflatable bouncy house castle businesses.
Oh, yeah.
And people like the idea of a business like that. We got a lot of inquiries on it. But after a while, people begin to realize that if they buy this kind of business, all of their weekends are going to be occupied, right? And so we would attract people, and then they would realize, I'm not going to have much of a life. I'm not going to have my weekends free. Ultimately, though, the buyer that we found was a family with 2 teenage boys, and the family was looking for a business that they could all work in together. And so it was perfect because the boys were still in school, but they had their driver's licenses, and so it became a family affair. All mom and dad, sort of answered the phone and made the bookings during the week, and the boys went and set up, the parties and things on the weekend, and it worked out well for them.
Yeah. So at what point do people come to you when they're thinking of buying a business, and how do they find out about you?
So it's very different for both sides of the transaction. So for the buyers, it's typically 2 different camps of people. So the first camp of people would be newcomers to a country. And often these people are migrating, and maybe they are professionals and have recognized credentials in their homeland, but they have difficulty getting those credentials recognized in their new country. But they still need an income. And so often these people get forced into the world of entrepreneurship. They need to acquire a business that's going to be able to provide that income that their family needs. And the second bucket of buyers, which would be very common, would be mid-career people who've had some degree of success in the workplace, and they know that they can achieve more and do more, they can earn more, but they can't see a path for that to happen in their current work environment. And they will often ultimately realize that they need to own their own business to make that happen. And most of these people will begin that journey by examining the idea of starting a business. And things like family obligations, mortgages, children getting ready to go to post-secondary education will cause them to pause and say, wait a minute, can I really take on a risky endeavor at this stage of my life?
Yeah.
And that pause will often generate the idea, or they'll be exposed to the idea of buying an existing business as a solution, where, if you buy something that already exists, it already has cash flow, you don't have that risky startup period.
Yeah.
And so they'll be introduced to this idea. And the way that they find us is through the internet. I started a YouTube channel 11 years ago answering people's questions about buying and selling small businesses. And so when people type a very specific question about doing a transaction or deal making into the internet, into Google, for example, one of my videos will often be the responses.
Yeah.
And so they get into my content online, and I've written some books which further expand on different areas of these topics, and I have a few online courses as well. And so they can educate themselves, and then if they want further help, one-on-one, then they engage us in a consulting engagement.
Yeah. Now, as well as YouTube, I believe you also have a podcast as well.
Yeah. So the podcast that I have is the audio from my YouTube.
Uh-huh.
So what we do is we have two kinds of content that we create. So every Wednesday I put out a video where it's me answering a question, a solo podcast. And that's on YouTube. And then we take the audio and put it on the audio feed. And then 2 or 3 times a month on a Monday, I'll have someone come in and we'll do a live stream on YouTube where we'll discuss some aspect of deal making or small business operations. And that goes out live to the big platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, etc. And then we'll take the audio from that and we'll put it on the podcast as well. So what people have discovered is, if they enjoy my content, they'll find me on YouTube, for example, but they'll realize it's just a video of people's heads talking. And so a lot of people will ultimately migrate over to following us on the podcast feed, and they'll just tune in when they're, driving their car or for a walk or something like that.
Yeah. So let's turn to the networking side of things now.
Sure.
How has networking helped you and your business?
Oh, it's important to my business, but a lot of the things that I have to teach buyers about is about how to be good networkers. When somebody decides to sell their business, they've got two choices. They can try to find a buyer themselves, or they can go to a business broker. And the brokers charge commissions. And what a broker will often tell a business owner is, hey, I'm going to create demand amongst multiple buyers, which will drive up the price, and that will compensate for the commission I earn. From the buyer's point of view, that means if you wait for something to come out on the market and be advertised for sale, you're going to be competing with other buyers.
Yeah.
And so I'll coach many of our buyers that they can avoid this competition, potentially get a deal sooner, or maybe get themselves a better deal if they're willing to go out and actually do the work of creating a presence within a certain ecosystem of businesses. And what this means is that the buyer needs to be able to define what kind of business they want to buy, usually by industry, size, geography, etc., or maybe a few characteristics of a business, home services or manufacturing, light industrial work, something like that. And once they've got that description, they can then go out into the community and try to meet those business owners and network with them, join the organizations they're a part of, use tools like LinkedIn to connect with people, invite people out for lunch, etc. And it can be a long process because not everybody, of course, wants to sell their business. Most people want to keep their business because it's their livelihood. It's how they make their money. But what you're doing is you're creating connections so that when somebody has a life event that requires them to consider selling their business, that they already know you.
Yeah.
And so I liken the process to a sales process. And I say to people that what you're selling is an opportunity to exit. So you need to identify the correct business owners that you are going to want to potentially offer an exit opportunity to. And you need to make sure that they get a chance to meet you and that they learn about you and see why you're a wise choice as a successor, so that when the time comes, they'll want to reach out to you.
Yeah.
And this is going to require that initial networking, but it's also going to require some kind of regular touch point on some kind of cadence that will remind these people that you're still around.
Yeah. It's about getting yourself in the right room, isn't it, with the right people?
Absolutely. And it's not just the business owners. I often coach people to think about the value chains or the way the industry is laid out. I'll give you a quick example. There was a gentleman I was working with who wanted to buy a landscaping business of some kind. And after some exploration, we realized he had experience in sprinkler systems and installation, maintenance, and repair. And I asked him, how many different brands of sprinklers are there? And there were 3 major manufacturers of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I said, each one of those brands has a representative or a salesperson or some kind of distributor in your geography that is out there promoting that product. And those people know all the owners of all the landscape companies that are doing that kind of work. And so those would be 3 people, if you can identify, that would be great to network with because they know all the owners. And they could introduce you potentially to somebody who might be a candidate to sell their business.
Yeah. And how do you go about growing your own network?
Well, I do a couple of different things that I really put a lot of effort into. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I make an effort to actually go and attend events and conferences and things and try to get myself invited as a speaker. If you can get yourself on stage, it seems like a lot more people want to talk to you afterwards. And so I try to do things like that. And just through my presence on social media, a lot of people will reach out to me on platforms like LinkedIn. So everyone kind of knows that LinkedIn is the place where you do business. And so I give this advice to many people. If you see somebody on YouTube or some other social platform and you think you could legitimately have some kind of business with them, it's often difficult to get their attention or get through to them on that platform. But if you can find the person on LinkedIn, it's usually a lot easier to actually connect and open a conversation with them if you can deliver immediate value in the way you communicate.
Yeah.
And this means, hey, I saw your videos over on YouTube. The reason I'm reaching out is this. I think that we could work together in this way. Would you like to have a chat? Of course, there's always that spam on LinkedIn from people who seem to be cutting and pasting. I don't recommend people do that. But it's a great place for thoughtful communication. And if you can demonstrate that you are legitimate in your interest to want to have a conversation with someone, that there's some kind of mutual benefit, then you can really open a lot of doors on that platform.
Yeah. So my final question then, David, if people want to connect with you, what's the best place for them to find you?
Well, if they want to connect with me, they can find me on LinkedIn or over at my blog site, davidcbarnett.com. But if they're just curious about the whole idea of deal making and buying and selling small businesses, just type David Barnett small business into any podcast player or YouTube, and you'll find me right away. I think I'm up to 800 videos on YouTube, and we discuss the specifics of deal making and interacting with brokers and buyers and sellers and financing and all that kind of stuff. And it's real content. It's not. There's a lot of hype online from people that are maybe trying to sell you something, but we have honest conversations on my channel.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you very much for being my guest today. I've enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks, Liz. Great to meet you today.
Thanks for listening to Small Business, Big Network. If you found this podcast useful, please do rate, review and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with the rest of your network too.